Hello everyone, you are listening to Audiobookish, an audiobook review and discussion podcast. My name is Fahed Rahman and I'm joined by Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And today we're going to be discussing the books of Jill Tomlinson as narrated by Maureen Lipman. Poppy, do you want to introduce the author?
Yeah, definitely. So, born in 1931, Jill Tomlinson never intended to be a writer. She trained as an opera singer and then decided to have a family whilst her voice matured. But illness intervened and she had to find another outlet for her energies. She started on a journalism course and by the third lesson decided she wanted to write for children. So she did. Jill Tomlinson's animal stories are much loved and have been best-selling children's books for nearly 4 decades. She died in 1976, just aged 45 years.
So this was, well, these series of books were your choices. So can you just maybe talk a little bit about how you first listened to them and, you know, why you kind of wanted to discuss them a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember when I first listened to them for the fact that there's such a big part of my childhood, really. I do know that I have a physical book of 2 of these, and I found it really cool, still do, because it's 2 books in one, and it's clever because it's the kind where you flip it on the short edge to do upside down, and you can then still read it from front to back as this story.
Okay.
So there's kind of back-to-back
Okay,
books.
yeah.
So yeah, and that has in it The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home and The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark. I don't know if that came before or after the audio, but I know that I loved that book partly because of the cool back to front bit, and I know that I absolutely adored the audio of both of those stories, and then a lot more came. Basically, if one could find the CDs for any more of the stories in that series, then we were having them. So yeah, and there were a few that I've kind of listened to less, that then when we were having a listen just now, I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure I have heard this one, but I didn't fully remember it. And yeah, there's some that really stood out, and basically I saw that they were on BorrowBox, which we've talked about before. It's the app for borrowing audiobooks and also ebooks through your library. It's also the company that I work for, so that's exciting. And that was partly why I'd seen that they were on there. And so I was very keen, and I thought we should have a chat about them. I was intrigued what Fahed thought, and I just wanted to gush about them because these were so close, or at least probably The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, probably is my top one, was so close to being in my top 5 audiobooks from our very first episode. And just wasn't the one that I picked, but so really wanted to talk about them.
Okay, so Poppy sent me like a long list of like these books, and I thought, well, I mean, they're only kind of an hour long each, and I think I listened to 3 of them. So I listened to The Penguin That Wanted to Find Out, The Gorilla Who Wanted to Grow Up, and The Cat That Wanted to Go Home. These are really beautiful books.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they?
I'm really glad that you recommended them. I was a bit iffy because I'm not Maureen Lipman's biggest fan.
Fair.
But she does a pretty good job of narrating these books. With an author as popular as Jill Tomlinson, I think there are a few different versions of the audiobooks out there, but the ones that we listened to were the Maureen Lipman ones. So let's start with The Cat That Wanted to Go Home.
Yeah.
Why does that one have a kind of particular place in your heart, and maybe talk a little bit about the plot and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so there's probably a few different reasons. One being the fact that it was one of the 2 in that book, for sure. But then also, I've always had cats in my house. Literally, since before I was born, we had cats, and I've always lived with cats, and I love cats a lot. And I think especially in this one, probably wasn't anywhere near when I first listened to these books, but I've listened so many times, and certainly to this one so many times, that there was some overlap with my wonderful cat Jeff, who was a lovely tabby cat and was our first tabby cat, certainly my first tabby cat, and like the cat in this book, has stripy fur and a spotted belly and loved being stroked the wrong way. So there was a real connection there. And this book really is all about the love between a cat and, you know, their people, their humans. And that just really has always struck home with me. I've always really loved it. And I do think that, Maureen does a really good job of it, and I always hear that. That's why I'm not sure how much I read the book, because I definitely just always hear her voice. But I listened to it so much when I was younger, and it's one of those, it comforts me. You know, if I'm wanting something to listen to going to sleep, because I often do, I pretty much always have something on going to sleep, but like ranges from like audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube videos, Twitch streams, all sorts of just noise, Netflix. You know, I always have something on going to sleep to. But this is one sometimes when, if I'm a bit sad and I want something comforting, familiar, this is one of my absolute go-tos. So,
the cat that wanted to go home, it's basically a gentle adventure story about a cat that stumbles across a hot air balloon, is transported to England, and then leads to kind of her adventures on how she kind of finds her way back home. She's kind of I say she. What is the name of the cat?
Yeah, it's Susie.
Susie.
Yeah,
Susie.
She's a little French cat.
Yeah.
Lives in a fishing village in France, and curls up in a basket, because cats do. They curl up in baskets. In fact, I literally just got a basket as a hamper thing and kept it so that our cat Tiara could lie in it, who's also a little tabby cat. I knew she would love the basket, and today she has proven she loves the basket because she sat in it. So love the basket. So she didn't mind that this was an even bigger basket, and only realises when she wakes up from a nap that she's over the channel and on her way to England.
Yeah. And, she's a very determined cat. She's always trying to jump in the channel to try and swim, to swim back to France. And it's a very gently funny book as well. Kind of one of the things that I liked about it was the fact that the English people kind of pick up on the fact that she meows in French. And I couldn't quite make out when she was meowing in French, some of the words that she was, Maureen Lipman was saying. So maybe you could expound on that a little bit, because you've listened to it a little bit more often. I couldn't quite make out what the cat was saying.
Yeah, no, a zillion times. And it is a bit weird. And I think it's one of those ones where you are asking a lot of your narrator, because it's quite easy to have that written down, but then to translate what is French words but said like a cat's meowing, but you don't want it to sound too much like they're saying the word, because then that will be a bit weird. But you want it to be recognizable as the word, and so that's a real challenge that you're asking your narrator to do. So things like I'm tempted to do an impression, but I've not practiced it, so I'm not going to. But she meows merci. To say thank you a lot of the time, and one of the people that looks after her is always saying that she has a funny meow, and so Missy is one of them. And then when she's really really sure she's going to get home this time, she says au revoir, and her parrot friend says it slightly more intelligibly for the human, and then they maybe figure it out, maybe what she has been saying. And then one of the other things that she says, crying it, is chez moi. So
what
my
does that
home.
mean?
I think it's my home.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so because she's wailing that her home is so far away, and she really wants to go home, and she keeps getting turned away from it. Things keep taking her back away. It's really cool, because it's one of those, and this is a theme across all of the books really, is that it has repetition through it. There's kind of a series of events. So in this case, it's she's heading down to the beach, she's going to find her way home. She sees something, she thinks, oh yay, this will get me home. We kind of, as listeners, have an idea that maybe that might not work. And then she figures out, oh no, it's not working. I'm so sad, and ends up going back to where she's been staying and getting some lovely food, but it's not fish. She prefers fish.
Yeah, she prefers fish.
Going back home and trying again tomorrow. And it keeps going like that. And it's a really good thing, and it's one of the things that's really well documented how helpful that is for children, having that kind of repetition in stories and things like that. So there's that, but equally, it's not boring. There's enough variation in that repetition. Like you say, there's humour in kind of the events that happen. There's so much differentiation in it, and the different characters you meet and how it works, that yes, it is structured with that repetition, but in a really good way that, again, lends to that familiarity kind of thing.
So you kind of know more about the children's fiction market than I do. What age is this kind of aimed at?
Oh, I mean, I've been listening to it for ages and still will for ages, but I think it's quite young. So the thing here on Audiobooks says kind of 5+.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I would have thought this would been a bit challenging for a 5-6-year-old.
I think that's fair, and I think it's probably the kind of thing where they might not get it all.
Yeah,
at that age, but as they get older, they might more. I think it's kind of the thing where I'm kind of thinking about the size of text on the book that I've got. And thinking it's probably one where maybe they'd, if they were reading that, they might be reading it with their parents.
Yeah.
They might be reading it at school. They might struggle with quite a lot of the words, but it's that kind of, it's possibly a stretching book, but that's also really good to kind of be stretched by things as well. And I think, maybe they might not get all of it, and certainly like the chez moi thing, because it never explains that that's what it is.
Yeah.
But that they can probably take some fun stuff from it. Even at that age, I'd reckon.
So of the 3 books that I listened to, I think while I did enjoy The Cat That Wanted to Go Home, I think it was probably my least favourite of the 3.
Okay.
I think like both The Gorilla Who Wanted to Grow Up and the Penguin That Wanted to Find Out hit me emotionally. I think like the Penguin That Wanted to Find Out hit me particularly emotionally hard for just one particular line in the book that had me bawling out. So let's talk about The Gorilla Who Wanted to Grow Up. So this is a story about a young gorilla, and he's with his family, and he just wants to find out what it means to be like an adult. And so another podcast that I listened to, Your Own Words, Becky, he's one of the co-hosts there, she was talking about the Moomins, and she really loves the Moomins, and she loves them because they're stories about how to be a person with other people, how to be kind of like a human being, and have like not grown up relationships, but how to have relationships with other people. And this is what I think was at the heart of this story, was kind of like, how to be not just the leader within your tribe and to look after other people, but how to manage those relationships with people that are younger than you, that people are older than you, with your peers, and knowing when the right time to take on responsibility is as well. So there's a lot of really heavy, complex stuff that really, some of the best writers throughout history have tried to tackle, and she just does it like with such simplicity and such beauty, and that's so difficult. So difficult. I mean, I really kind of had to tip my hat off to Jill for this one, because there's a lot of really complicated stuff in there. So I don't know what you felt about it.
Yeah, I love this one. This is definitely one of the ones highest up my list of favourites for sure, and one that stuck out to me, and one that I have listened to a good number of times, and definitely knew that I'd heard this one before. So I really love it. I agree with you. It is very much about growing up, what it means to be a grown-up, and his Pongo, the main character gorilla in this, his relationship with his younger sister is really adorable. And how he pitches in with that, and all the relationships in it are really lovely, and I've always really enjoyed the story. And I also, probably more so listening to it this time around than when I was younger, certainly, there's so much about actual science of the animals, and you get this across quite a few of them, and we'll go on to talk about the penguin one, like the science of emperor penguins and things like that. There is things about kind of how the tribe works, and who the silverback is, and those kinds of things where it's in that sense, it's got that scientific teaching bit, if we're saying for children, or even just if you're interested in it, the actual learning about who gorillas are, how they work, the kind of things they do is really, really interesting. And kind of connected to that is there's a real strong message that you don't really have in The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, because it's not about the same kind of animal, it's not the same kind of thing, but about like conservation stuff, about the threat of humans and how that interplays with them. That is a really key part of it, I think. And as you say, put really simply.
Yeah, I think sometimes simplicity is it's misunderstood how difficult it is to do simple things well. And I'm really glad that you brought up kind of like the natural science element of the gorilla who wanted to grow up and the emperor penguins, because that is something that struck me as well, and I hadn't written it down in my notes, so I'm really glad that you brought it up. Sometimes that stuff can come, when it's in books, sometimes it can come across as a little bit dry, but it's never it almost seems incidental. So you're kind of getting the knowledge kind of like, oh, this is kind of the way that it's not kind of like lectured at you, because a theme through the 3 books that I've listened to it is about younger animals trying to find their way in the world, of trying to find their way home, trying to find how the world around them works. And stuff. So that, I think that's a nice segue into giving us the knowledge about how their particular, I say societies, but how they're kind of like, how their groups operate. So I really enjoyed that. It's interesting you brought up about his relationship with his younger sister. Like the thing that really struck to me was his relationship with his mum and his dad, and kind of like that idea, someday you're gonna have to take over that responsibility of looking after the tribe and the troop of gorillas, and his mate deciding, well, I want to stay alongside you, and look, I'm not going to find my own group and stuff like that. I found that stuff really lovely and touching as well. So I that's something that for me struck quite close to my heart. And again, it's not like, so like the cat that wanted to go home, I'd say that's kind of like action filled, but there's kind of lots of incidents in there. Whereas the gorilla who wanted to grow up, there are not that many. I suppose there are things that happen in it, but it's not kind of like, well, he does this to get to there. It's just kind of like, it's more slice of life, I think, really.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. It is more, following through a story. It's certainly less regimented kind of repetition thing, but there is still some sort of element of, he's finding out this new thing about growing up and stuff like that. And I think just going back as well to what you were saying about those relationships, and obviously there's to some extent where that is coming away from the natural sciencey stuff, you know. We're not saying, your kids should take everything in this as gospel of truth for how they work, but compared to a lot of other stories that, personify animals and things, it has some real root in the natural world, in kind of how that works. And also, there are a lot of certainly with gorillas, very much similar to ours with relationships and stuff, aren't they, with how closely related we are and stuff. So that was just a quick note on that. But it's less, there is kind of a big action part, but it's less kind of action and more their day-to-day, and that real, like, to get the character progression across an hour, and I can say this for a lot of the books as well, to get the character progression of the main character across the hour is really impressive as well, isn't it?
It's not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time, and I think it does help that throughout all the books there is, is it a big cast of characters? I do feel like there's a lot of people that you get to meet across all the books, but to kind of, you get a firm idea of who kind of everyone is. And Pogo, I think he's probably my favorite protagonist throughout the 3 groups. And I think the penguin that wanted to find out is probably my favorite of the 3, and it's about a young emperor penguin, and he, if I remember correctly, it's a while since I listened to it, like 2 weeks ago. Sorry. It's fine. He doesn't have like a mum or a dad to look after him, so he's kind of adopted by this. I don't see if the right word is like elder statesman of like the penguin community, and he's kind of like, go ahead. Yeah, no. So because I think that if I remember correctly, so I think this is kind of a lesson about the natural world thing there, about how sometimes if there's abandoned eggs and also a male penguin without an egg, then they'll go and adopt it. And that's kind of, that is a really nice backstory for that character, is showing that little scenario where that happens. But I'm pretty sure from some nature things that I've watched that is the case. And in emperor penguins, and I think a lot of other penguins, once the eggs are laid, they then look after the eggs for a while the females go out to sea
and eat a load of fish.
Yeah,
as many fish as they can.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, in this case, it's not actually Otto's dad that's looking out for him. It is another penguin that found his egg and picked it up. So.
Yeah, and there's one particular line in this where the penguin... Sorry.
No, don't be sorry at all.
Where the penguin is leaving Otto, and Otto asks him to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And the penguin says, I need you to help me to look after myself because I need to go and feed. And it just...
Yeah.
It just really reminded me of my mum, because she never really did that. She never really took time out to like take care of herself. And I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry at all.
Yeah, it just yeah. So it's just that one line really got to me, and it's a really beautiful book. Sorry.
No need to be sorry at all.
So the way penguin societies operate is after a certain age, you know, the males that have been looking after these kids have to go back into the sea and feed, and they have to find someone else new to look after him. So I think they say like aunties and stuff like that, and these aunties come in and they form this community, and they start feeding these penguin chicks. And also kind of like, because he's the first chick to hatch, he's got kind of like a leadership position, and he has to kind of like pass down these facts and stories that have been told to him by all the other uncle and father penguins. And I really like that kind of aspect of it, as kind of like he wants to know things because he needs to kind of share it among the younger chicks, and he has to kind of, quite similar to Pogo in a lot of ways, he has to kind of take that caring responsibility of the younger chicks as well.
Yes, definitely. And I think these are two very similar stories. They have the very same kind of theme of finding out about themselves, what's expected of them, taking on responsibility for the younger ones, wanting to grow up, but maybe being a little bit nervous about it as well.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And yeah, they are very similar books. But again, like I was saying about the repetition in The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, that's not a bad thing. You know, it's reinforcing those lovely ideas to kids of that kind of growing up, of what childhood is, and those kinds of things. And again, so one of the other stories is the Aardvark Who Wasn't Sure, and that again is quite similar. He's not so sure about growing up and what it means to be an adult aardvark, but he's going to figure it out and kind of stuff. The Otter Who Wanted to Know is another one. So there's a load of themes in there that are really similar. And then there's The Hen Who Wouldn't Give Up is more similar to The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, because she's determined to get to a place, and she fails getting there for quite a while, and she's determined to have a family on her own, and that, you know, she has a lot of trials there. So you could kind of group them in those ways. Yeah.
I think the thing that I particularly liked about both the gorilla who wanted to grow up and the penguin that wanted to find out is that children sometimes do have an anxiety about what it means to be a grown up and change. And like, I think one of the things that kind of struck me a little bit is kind of, these would be like really good books to give to kids that are maybe going from junior to primary school, kind of that age where you're kind of like, oh, I'm going into kind of like big boy school now. And I think kind of like explaining, okay, there's going to be some challenges and some changes, but it's just a natural process, really. And you know there are things that are going to be out there that's scary and stuff like that, but you've got people around you that are going to help guide you, and you know, older kids and younger kids, and so don't be too anxious about it. So I think that's the one thing I've particularly liked about both the gorilla that wanted to grow up and the penguin that wanted to find out, is kind of that growing up can be this big scary thing, but it's also this wonderful adventure as well.
Yeah, definitely. And also that it's okay to take your time.
Yeah.
You know, it's you don't have to be there yet. You don't have to be a big grown-up right now, you know, kind of nudging in those directions, sure, maybe, but you don't need to be rushing it. I think is really nice as well.
And it's okay to ask questions. I think that's the other thing that I really liked about both those books is that both Otto and Pongo would ask questions, and they wouldn't, I think sometimes kids don't want to be seen to not know stuff. So yeah, I think that's the other thing I kind of quite liked about that, is kind of maybe all encourage kids to actually just ask questions. Whether they get good answers or not, I think is is an entirely different question as well.
But yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, like, kids go through a phase of, you know, why, on everything. And yeah, it's encouraging that. There's a reason kids go through that phase. It's because it helps them discover about the world.
Yeah.
You know? So even if there's maybe a little bit of, you ask a lot of questions, maybe said in some of these, the adults around are very much supportive of that and encouraging of that. And that is a really good example for kids to hear that, yeah, it's okay to ask questions and learn and, be supported. And that's definitely, much nicer than, you know, why are you asking so many questions? Just kind of thing.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about Maureen Lipman's narration. I think across all the books I listened to, I mean, it's just the 3 books, I think she did a really good job of capturing the characters really well. And all 3 books, even though there's kind of maybe similar themes running through, the characters are still really different.
Yes.
And she does a really good job of, like, sometimes when you're listening to the same voice over and over again, you kind of the characters can kind of sound similar, but I think she did a really good job of separating all the characters out, so that each book had its own feel, which coming from the same narrator, I think is really quite impressive.
Oh, agreed, definitely. And I think there's some kind of a little bit of a nifty trick in there with kind of accents and stuff. So kind of the like American-y style one, and there's like a kind of a Scousey bit one, and that definitely helps, because I don't think there's any reason why those characters needed those accents. You know what I mean? They're not like for geographically where they are, that's stated in the text, but that's kind of used to help differentiate. And yeah, like you say, it was probably done with knowing that someone might listen to all of this series or some of this series, you know, not just kind of thinking about the book in isolation and how we're going to distinguish these separate characters, but really thinking about it across the whole. And yeah, it's good to know that you think that worked out well, and I think so too. And then even within the books, I agree. It's so different. And going back to like The Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, where obviously the French accent in that does have a bit of placing on it, but there's so many characters in that, so many, and ones that just kind of come up incidentally when she's on her journeys, and yet they're all really different. You know, maybe only if you've listened to it quite as many times as me, but I bet we could do a quiz where you're like, which character's that? And it was like, boom, I know that voice. I know who that is. I might not name them right, but I know which obscure little character that is and stuff like that. And I think that was really good.
I mean, it's a good point that you make, because I'm listening to an audiobook at the moment, and the narrator does a really good job, but some of the characters, especially some of the male characters, do kind of sound quite similar. And you know, I didn't appreciate how good Maureen Lipman was at kind of like doing kind of male voices. You know, it's really quite impressive. These series of books have turned me around on Maureen Lipman.
That's good. And I'm glad, because it would have been a shame if you got to kind of the end of 3 hours and were like, no.
So I think these series of books I would like firmly recommend for people of all ages, really. I mean, you know, I mean, like I said, they're kind of the penguin that wanted to find out really did make me genuinely cry. And kind of the rest of the books that I am going to probably, I'm not saying I didn't have time, I just didn't get round to kind of listening to some of the other ones. Mainly because when I tried to borrow them from Audiobooks, they were kind of like, there's like a massive waiting list, which I think is kind of
does so popular.
They're really, really popular. They're only an hour long each. I haven't checked out the prices on like Audible or Kobo or anything like this, but I can't imagine they'd be too expensive. But you know, they're on Audiobooks or Libby. I think they'd be nice books to check out for, you know, for your kids or just for yourself, really. So yeah. Thank you, Poppy, for that. I really did enjoy listening to them.
I'm so glad that you did. And it was really nice to listen again. And because, like you say, kind of fitting them in. There's some of these that, I listened to over and over again. And I think I've gone looking for Cat Who Wanted to Go Home because I wanted to listen to it. And on my new phone, I haven't got my CD version crossed over to it yet. So it was fine, not on Audiobooks. But I wouldn't have necessarily listened to these ones again and the ones that I just crammed on 2 times speed earlier in time for this recording again for a while if it weren't for this. So that was really good. And yeah, I'm so glad that you love them, and I echo your thoughts. I think definitely get your kids to listen to them, because I loved them as a kid, and I think they will as well. And also yourself. And there's a lot, people always say this all the time, but there's a lot that you pick up as an adult with kids content that you didn't notice before. And I don't mean like lewd jokes hidden in there. That's not the case of this one. A lot of kids stuff that I like, yes, but not the case with these ones. But a lot of that stuff about, you know, isn't it sweet about things, and kind of looking nostalgically, maybe about your own childhood or other kids you know or whatever, about that growing up. And if you have pets, how much Susie wants to get home, and the love she has with the boys there is incredible. So many reasons for you to listen. Yeah, so that was really nice, Poppy. So cool. So if you've got any recommendations that you'd like us to check out, please email us at audiobookishpod@gmail.com, and please subscribe and share the podcast on your social media, guys. It really helps us grow and put more episodes out. Okay, guys, thank you, and bye. Thank you so much. Bye.